First step to the black and white forest painting is to paint the canvas black. Once the canvas has been painted black, you will want to set it aside and let it completely dry. Step 2 will be creating your light source. So you will use a paper towel or one of those tough rags, and you start wherever you want your light to be concentrated. You put your first bit of white there and then slowly work your way out so that the light fades as you are going from the concentrated light source in the center outwards to the edge of your painting. If you need to add more paint to your paper towel to get the effect that you want, make sure you always start back in the center where it is most concentrated and then work your way out again so that you don't get concentrated white spots in other areas of your painting, and that will just throw your whole painting off. The paint was gobbed on my paper towel, so I just used my thumb to thin it out a little bit so that it wouldn't be overwhelming when I started working on the painting again. You will want your light spot to dry completely before you move on to the landscaping. But once it's dry, you can then use like a light gray. So I like to mix my black and my white just slightly and then water it down so it's more of a wash. And that is where I start mapping out how I want my land to flow. When I know about where my land is going to lay, I will use a paintbrush that has a stiffer bristle and start using lighter colors that are in the background so that I can create a grass effect. The stiffer bristles scratch when I push it onto the canvas, so it creates a grass appearance. Now it's time for the fun part, putting in the first trees. So you want to use the black over the center of your light spot. That will bring more depth to your painting. And then eventually you will start working out and you get lighter as you work away from the center of your light source. So the first few trees that I will put in will be black, but as I work to the outside of my canvas on both sides of my painting, they will go to a gray scale to almost white. Here I'm mixing a little bit of black and a little bit of white to make my gray. I don't blend it completely because I do really like the effect that it gives as the paintbrush leaves the imperfections. It almost looks like bark when you get the different tones of gray and just a touch of black or a touch of white in your gray trees. The trees being painted on the outside edges are a very, very light gray. As you're doing the trees, you can do little scratches and little tiny trunks too under the large trees, just in the background. That way then it makes your forest look a little fuller. You don't have to do full trees in that background, but just little hints that there are some. I'm gonna add a path to this painting. I just love the way that the path makes you carry your eye up the painting. It gives you a place for your eye to go and to wonder, where does that path go? Could I walk down it? I used the same wash technique to mark out the path, and then I started to use black to create slopes or drops, like the soil had broke away, to give just a little bit of flavor to the landscape, that it's not all the same. Please don't mind my awkward brush holding techniques, and every now and then I bump the camera, and that's just because my baby is actually on my hip. You'll see her hand kind of fly into screen here and there. When I use white, I am just highlighting areas that I want it to appear the light is really catching it, or it is higher than other parts of the landscape around it. It's just the opposite effect when you use black. The black creates more of a shadow or a hole or any kind of drop in the landscape. Using the black is just the darker areas where the sun won't be touching. It's really nice to use cheap paintbrushes sometimes, because then you don't feel quite as bad when you mess up their bristles beyond repair. As I'm getting further away from the light source on the ground, my colors are getting a touch darker, to the, darker end of the grayscale. I'm using a stiffer paintbrush again to kind of give texture to my drops in the landscape and a little bit of texture to my path. It's entertaining to me that every time I do a painting, I still have a little bit of anxiety about, am I going to be making the right decision? And being afraid of making the right decision with a paintbrush is kind of silly, for lack of a better term. So this is a perfect way for me to just get over it. Just paint. Who cares if you make a mistake? I'm just putting some little finishing touches to the scenery. A lot of my paintings I like to add some shrubs or some kind of evergreen, but this one I'm really enjoying the way it's looking, so I'm not going to do that this time. But we're almost ready to the super fun part, and that is creating your shadows and then creating your highlight. I'm gonna just tap the painting to make sure it's dry, because you want it to be dry when you do your shadows and your light source or your flares of light, because if you don't, you're just gonna run your moist paintbrush right through some wet paint and then make a smear across your painting. So when you're ready to do the shadows, you just take a little bit of black paint on a soft bristled paintbrush and water it down. Make it more like an ink or a wash. That way then when it dries a little bit, you can see how dark it is. And if you make it too bold all at once, you might not like the decision you made. Put a shadow on any of the trees or anything that's high to block out the sun, then it needs a shadow under it to give it some depth, and that will pull you into your painting also. I couldn't do the sunbeams with my baby on my hip. Not that good, I guess. But it's the same idea as the shadows. You water down the white paint though, and it's definitely important to make sure your painting is dry when you do this, because you need it to be really bold and white to give you that streamer or like the laser beam sort of appearance with your sunbeams. Make sure you start in the center of your white spot and fan your brush out. That way then all of your beams are coming from the same spot of your painting. So there you have it, folks. That is how easy it is to do a black and white forest painting. It took me about an hour to do this painting. It really doesn't take long, but it's amazing how quickly you can go from a white canvas to black canvas to a pretty feathered white spot on your black canvas to something that actually has depth that you've created. Please leave a comment below if you got any information out of this. Share, subscribe, and like. Have a great day.